The restaurant manager placed a polished hand on her elbow, his voice low and apologetic. "Miss, I'm sorry. I have to ask you to leave right now." Maya stood slowly, the scrape of her chair against marble echoing through the upscale Manhattan restaurant. Eyes turned. Conversations paused. She felt the weight of every stare as heat crawled up her neck, but she kept her spine straight, her head high. The embarrassment burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them see her cry. Inside, at the corner table draped in candlelight and expensive indifference, Jinwoo sat perfectly still. His tailored charcoal suit fit like armor. His face revealed nothing, carved from stone and ice. The untouched lobster risotto steamed between them like evidence of his contempt. "I said one drink," he repeated, his voice flat and final. "That's all this was supposed to be." Maya turned back, her heels clicking against the floor. She looked at him, really looked at him, past the expensive watch and the cold eyes and the walls he'd built around himself. When she spoke, her voice didn't shake. "You know what's sad? You think power protects you from loneliness. But I can see it in your eyes. You're drowning in it." She walked out before he could respond, leaving him frozen in his seat, her words hanging in the air like smoke he couldn't clear from his lungs. He didn't know it yet, but this was the moment his life split in two. If you're already hooked by this unexpected first encounter, stick around, because this story is about to take you on an emotional ride you won't forget. The city lights of Manhattan blurred past the taxi window as Maya leaned her head against the cold glass. She kicked off her heels, letting them fall to the floor with soft thuds that felt like surrender. The strength she'd been holding onto finally cracked, and she closed her eyes, breathing out all the tension she'd been carrying since the moment she'd sat down across from him. The driver glanced back. "You okay, miss?" She nodded, not trusting her voice yet. Maya worked for a community center in Brooklyn, helping people who'd been through hell rebuild their lives. She spent her days listening to stories of pain and survival, holding space for people who had nowhere else to turn. She was damn good at her work, but tonight she felt the weight of it all pressing down on her chest. She was tired of being strong, tired of being judged before anyone bothered to know her, tired of men looking at her like she was less than human. The blind date had been her friend Rochelle's idea. "Just try, Maya. One more time. What's the worst that could happen?" This was the worst that could happen. She pulled out her phone and stared at the text Rochelle had sent 3 hours ago. "His name is Jinwoo Park. Works in import-export. A little serious, but give him a chance." Import-export. Maya almost laughed. That was code for something darker, something her friend probably didn't know or chose to ignore. She'd sensed it the moment she'd seen him, the way danger clung to some men like expensive cologne. But here was the thing she couldn't explain, even to herself. Something about him had felt unfinished, like a conversation cut off mid-sentence, like a door left slightly open. "I should have walked away sooner," she whispered to her reflection in the window. But something about him felt incomplete. Jinwoo sat alone in the restaurant, his hands flat on the table, his breathing controlled. The other diners had stopped watching. The normal rhythm of the place resumed around him, like water flowing past a rock. He was a man who lived on control. As the head of a Korean crew operating in New York's underground, control wasn't just important. It was survival. Every decision calculated. Every emotion locked away. Every weakness eliminated before it could be used against him. He had rules. Clear, unbreakable rules. And one of those rules, burned into him after past betrayal, was simple. Never trust what you can't control. Never trust emotions. And, especially, never trust Black women. It wasn't something he shouted about. It wasn't something he defended in public. It was cold rejection, a wall built brick by brick after Keisha had destroyed everything 5 years ago. She'd been beautiful and smart and had looked at him like he was more than his reputation. She'd gotten close enough to learn his secrets, then she'd sold those secrets to his enemies for cash he'd paid for in blood. He'd learned his lesson the hard way. Hearts were weaknesses. Trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. This blind date had been a favor owed to his business partner's wife, nothing more. Show up, have a drink, leave. Simple. Except Maya hadn't been simple. She hadn't tried to impress him with fake conversation or flirty looks. She hadn't made herself smaller to fit his expectations. Instead, she'd sat across from him like she could see through every wall he'd built, and when she'd called him out, when she'd named his loneliness like she had every right to reach inside his chest and touch it, something had cracked open inside him. He signaled for the check, his jaw tight with something he refused to name. Outside, the night air hit Maya's face like a slap of reality. She stood on the sidewalk, debating whether to walk or find another cab, when she heard his voice behind her. Wait. She turned slowly, her arms crossed over her chest. Jinwoo stood in the restaurant doorway, his hands in his pockets, his face unreadable. What? The word came out sharper than she meant it to. He walked toward her, and she noticed for the first time how he moved, like every step was planned, like the world might attack at any moment, and he needed to be ready. I was rude, he said finally. Maya raised an eyebrow. You were worse than rude. You treated me like trash. I know. He stopped a few feet away, keeping distance between them. I'm not good at this. At what? Basic respect. At letting people in. The honesty in his voice surprised her. She studied his face, looking for the game, for the angle, but found only exhaustion wearing the mask of control. Why did you even agree to this date? She asked. Obligation. Owing a favor to someone. And now. He hesitated, and in that pause, Maya saw something vulnerable flash across his face before he locked it away again. Now I don't know, he admitted. She should have walked away. Every instinct screamed at her to call that cab and go home and forget this complicated, dangerous man existed. But she'd spent her entire career reading people, understanding the difference between those who were evil and those who were just terrified of being hurt. One more drink, she heard herself say. Inside. And this time you actually talk to me like I'm a human being. Something that might have been relief crossed his face. He nodded. They sat back down at the same table, and this time the silence between them felt different. Less hostile, more uncertain, which somehow felt more real. Tell me about your work, he said, and it wasn't small talk. It was real curiosity wrapped in careful walls. Maya leaned back, considering how much to share. I work with people who've survived trauma. Abuse, violence, loss. Things that would break most people. I help them find their strength again. That must be hard. It is, but it matters. She paused, then added, I see a lot of people who hide behind power because they're scared of pain. They think if they control everything, they won't have to feel anything. His jaw tightened. Is that what you think I'm doing? Isn't it? Jinwoo picked up his glass, studying the amber liquid like it held answers. In my world, feeling things gets you killed. In my world, not feeling things kills you from the inside. Same result, different method. He looked up at her, and for the first time that night, he almost smiled. Almost. They talked for another hour. She told him about growing up in Brooklyn, about her mother who'd worked 3 jobs to keep them alive, about choosing social work when everyone told her to pick something that paid better. He listened more than he spoke, but when he did share, it came in careful pieces. His family and soul. The expectations that had crushed him. The choice between the life chosen for him and the life he'd taken by force. When Maya mentioned her exhaustion from carrying other people's pain, he said quietly, Who carries yours? The question landed in her chest like a stone in still water. That's the thing, she said softly. I'm so used to being strong. I forgot how to let anyone else hold me up. Jinwoo set down his glass. I understand that more than you know. The restaurant began to empty around them. The staff moved quietly, resetting tables, dimming lights. Neither of them moved to leave. I should go, Maya finally said, though she didn't stand. I'll walk you out. This time, when they stepped onto the Manhattan sidewalk, the night felt different.
Softer.
The sharp edges of their first meeting had worn smooth, revealing something neither of them had expected to find. He raised his hand for a cab, but before she got in, she turned to him. "Why do you really have a problem with black women?" The directness of the question stopped him cold. She watched the walls go up, watched him prepare to shut her out, but then something shifted in his eyes. "I don't have a problem with you," he said quietly. "I'm scared because you make me feel things I can't control." Maya held his gaze for a long moment, then got into the cab, without another word. Jinwoo stood on the sidewalk long after her taillights disappeared into the river of Manhattan traffic. Back in his penthouse apartment, Jinwoo poured himself a drink he didn't want and stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. His phone buzzed with messages from his crew, situations needing decisions, problems needing solutions. He ignored them all. Her words kept circling back. "You're drowning in it." He was drowning. Had been for years. But drowning required admitting you needed air, needed saving, needed someone to pull you back to the surface. And Jinwoo had spent his entire adult life convincing himself he didn't need anyone. Until tonight. Until a woman with eyes that saw too much and a voice that cut through his defenses like they were paper had sat across from him and refused to be dismissed. He told himself she was a mistake, a moment of weakness. By morning, he'd have forgotten her name, her face, the way she'd looked at him like he was worth saving. But when morning came, he was still standing at the window, still thinking about her, still feeling the strange ache of wanting something he couldn't control. Across the city, Maya sat cross-legged on her bed, her journal open in her lap. She'd filled 3 pages with thoughts she couldn't organize, feelings she couldn't name. About his sadness. About the weight she'd seen behind his carefully controlled eyes. About the way loneliness had radiated from him like cold from stone in winter. She started writing something personal, something about hope and second chances and the dangerous possibility of connection. Then she stopped, pen hovering above the page. This was how people got hurt. This was how strong women ended up broken by men who confused intensity with love. She closed the journal, the page unfinished, the thought incomplete. But as she lay down to sleep, she couldn't stop replaying the moment he'd said, "I'm scared because you make me feel things I can't control." 3 days passed. Maya threw herself into work, into other people's stories, into anything that would keep her from thinking about Jinwoo Park and his fortress heart. She told herself it had been one night, one strange encounter, nothing more. Then her phone buzzed with an unknown number. "There's a coffee shop on West 12th, tomorrow, 2 p.m. If you come, I'll explain everything you asked. If you don't, I'll understand."
No signature.
No name. But she knew. Maya stared at the message for 20 minutes before typing back a single word. "Okay." The coffee shop was small and simple, the kind of place where artists nurse single coffees for hours and nobody cared. Jinwoo sat in the back corner, and when Maya walked in, she saw the difference immediately. He'd come alone. No security hovering nearby. No expensive suit. Just dark jeans and a black sweater that made him look younger, less armored. He stood when she approached, a sign of respect that surprised her. "You came," he said. "I almost didn't." She sat down across from him. "Tell me why I should stay." Jinwoo folded his hands on the table. "Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. Because you were right about everything you said. Because I'm tired of being alone in rooms full of people." The honesty was startling, raw in a way she hadn't expected from him. "What changed?" Maya asked. "You did. Or maybe you just held up a mirror and I finally looked." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I built my life around control because 5 years ago, I trusted the wrong person. She was a black woman named Keisha. She got close to me, learned my secrets, then sold them to people who wanted me dead. I survived, barely, but I learned to blame all black women for what she did. It wasn't fair. It wasn't right. It was just easier than admitting I'd been a fool. Maya absorbed this, understanding the psychology even as anger flickered through her. So, you punished every black woman you met for one person's betrayal. Yes.
No excuses. No justifications.
Just truth. That's racism, Jinwoo. Trauma doesn't excuse that. I know. He met her eyes. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm just telling you where it came from, and that I was wrong. They sat in silence, the coffee shop humming with quiet conversation around them. Why me? Maya finally asked. Why reach out? Because when you looked at me that night, you didn't see what I show the world. You saw what I hide from it. And instead of running, you stayed. He leaned forward slightly. I've spent years avoiding people who feel deeply because they ask too much, need too much, see too much. But you don't need me to be anything. You just refuse to make yourself smaller, and that scares me and makes me feel alive at the same time. Maya felt her walls cracking despite her better judgment. I avoid emotionally unavailable men because I'm tired of being the only one brave enough to be real. I value honesty over charm, presence over potential. Then I'll be honest. I don't know how to do this, but I want to try. She studied his face, looking for the manipulation she'd been trained to spot, but found only raw uncertainty. One step at a time, she said softly. And if you pull away, I won't chase you. Fair enough. They talked for hours. About his work, carefully described but less hidden. About her work, the stories that haunted her, the victories that made it worthwhile. About New York and Seoul, and the ways cities shaped the people who survived them. When they finally left the coffee shop, the sun had started dropping toward the horizon, painting the Manhattan streets in gold and shadow. Walk with me? He asked. Maya nodded. They walked through the city without direction, past food carts and street musicians and couples holding hands like the world wasn't complicated. Jinwoo stayed close to her, not touching but present, protective in a way that felt natural rather than possessive. It was Maya who noticed them first. Two men across the street, walking parallel to their path, eyes too focused, movements too coordinated. Jinwoo, she said quietly. He'd already seen them. Without breaking stride, he shifted position, placing himself between Maya and the potential threat. His entire body language changed, the careful softness replaced by something harder, readier. The men turned down a side street. False alarm, or warning delivered. Does that happen often? Maya asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. More than I'd like. He looked at her, searching for fear, for judgment. Does it bother you? I've learned how to stay calm around dangerous men, she said. Comes with the territory of my work. He studied her carefully, and she felt the weight of his assessment. Attraction burned in his gaze, but so did something else. Suspicion, maybe. Or recognition that she wasn't naive about the world he lived in. They kept walking. As evening settled over the city, they found themselves in a quieter neighborhood, tree-lined streets that felt far from the chaos of Manhattan. Jinwoo stopped walking, turned to face her. I need to tell you something, he said, and for the first time, she heard vulnerability shake beneath his words.
I'm lonely.
So lonely that some nights I can't breathe from it. I've built this empire of control, surrounded myself with people who obey without question, and I've never felt more isolated. No one chooses me. They choose my power, my money, my protection. But never just me. Maya's heart cracked open. She reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away, and took his hand. You don't have to be that man with me, she said softly. I already see past all of that. Jinwoo looked down at their joined hands like he couldn't quite believe they were real. His fingers tightened around hers, and she felt the tremor run through him, years of armor cracking all at once. They walked like that, hand in hand, through the quiet streets as the city lights began to sparkle against the darkening sky. Tell me something true, Maya said. Something you've never told anyone. He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then, barely above a whisper, I'm afraid that if I let myself love someone, they'll use it to destroy me. So I've been destroying myself slowly instead, and I don't know which death is worse. Maya stopped walking. She turned to face him fully, both hands holding his now. Love isn't supposed to destroy you, she said. Real love, healthy love, builds you up even when it's hard. What Keisha did wasn't love. It was betrayal wrapped in pretty words. How do I know the difference? Love gives you choice. Manipulation takes it away. She paused, then added, I'm not asking you to trust me completely right now. I'm just asking you to stay open to the possibility that not everyone will hurt you. Jinwoo pulled her closer, slowly, testing boundaries, giving her room to resist. She didn't. When they were close enough to feel each other's breath, he stopped. I don't want to hurt you either, he whispered. Then don't. The kiss happened like a storm breaking. Not rushed, not desperate, but inevitable. His hands cradled her face like she was something precious, something worth protecting rather than possessing. His lips were soft against hers, questioning at first, then deeper as she responded, her hands sliding up to grip his shoulders. Heat rushed through Maya's body, making her dizzy. She'd been kissed before, but never like this. Never with this much raw honesty behind it. His mouth moved against hers like he was trying to say everything he couldn't put into words, and she answered with the same desperate honesty. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing harder, he pressed his forehead to hers. This feels dangerous, he murmured, his voice rough. The best things usually do. His hands slid from her face to her waist, pulling her closer, and she could feel the rapid beat of his heart against her chest. The heat between them was undeniable now, electric and consuming. Maya. He breathed her name like a prayer, like a confession. I want you. God help me. I want you so badly it scares me. She looked up at him, seeing the war in his eyes between desire and fear, between wanting to hold on and wanting to protect himself. Then have me, she whispered, bold and certain. I'm right here. He kissed her again, harder this time, less controlled. His hands gripped her waist tighter, possessive now, claiming. She melted into him, all the walls she'd built crumbling under the heat of his touch. They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other, and the New York night, the city humming around them like a heartbeat. He didn't know love could feel this quiet, this gentle, this much like coming home and burning alive at the same time. But as they started walking again, his hand still holding hers, Jinwoo studied her profile in the streetlight. Something shifted in his expression, a shadow of the careful operator he'd always been. There's something you're not telling me, he said quietly. Maya's steps faltered for just a moment before she steadied herself. She didn't pull away from him, didn't deny it. Instead, she stopped walking and turned to face him fully. I didn't expect to feel this, she said, her voice soft but honest. I was hoping we'd have more time. Jinwoo searched her face, looking for deception, for danger, for the betrayal he'd learned to expect. But all he saw was conflict, emotion, the same vulnerability he'd just exposed in himself. He nodded slowly, choosing not to push, choosing to trust even though trust felt like stepping off a cliff in the dark. We'll figure it out, he said finally. The moment ended quietly, tender and unresolved and real. He walked her to her building, and at the door, he kissed her again. Slower this time, deeper, like he was memorizing the taste of her. His hand slid up her back, pressing her close, and she could feel the hunger in him, the need barely held in check. I should go, he murmured against her lips, though he made no move to leave. Yeah, she breathed, her hands fisted in his shirt. You should. But they stood there for another long moment, unwilling to let go, before he finally stepped back. Tomorrow, he asked. Tomorrow. She watched him walk away, his hands in his pockets, his shoulders carrying the weight of everything unsaid between them. Later that night, alone in her Brooklyn apartment, Maya sat on her bed with her journal open in her lap. The city hummed faintly outside her window, millions of stories unfolding at the same time in the dark. Her hands trembled slightly as she wrote, words spilling onto the page in her careful handwriting. About Jinwoo, about the kiss that had set her on fire, about the way he'd looked at her like she was the first real thing he'd seen in years, about the impossible situation she'd found herself in, torn between what she felt and what she knew was coming. She wrote until her hand cramped, until the words ran out, until there was nothing left to say except the truth she couldn't speak out loud yet. Maya closed the journal, pressing it against her chest for a moment. Then, after a pause that felt like the space between one life and another, she flipped to the back cover. Tucked inside was a photograph, edges worn from handling. In it, a younger Jinwoo stood next to a man Maya recognized from her case files at work. Her current project. The reason she'd agreed to this blind date in the first place, though Rochelle couldn't know that. The man in the photo had disappeared 5 years ago. His family had been destroyed. His daughter had been one of Maya's clients for 2 years now, still trying to heal from the trauma of losing her father without explanation. And Jinwoo had been there the night he disappeared. Maya stared at the photograph, at Jinwoo's face from 5 years ago, at the man beside him who'd vanished and whose family she'd been helping piece their lives back together. Her expression tightened with emotion. Not guilt, exactly. Not calculation. Just conflict, raw and honest, and impossibly complicated. She pressed the journal to her chest again, closing her eyes against the tears that finally came. I didn't plan to fall for him, she whispered to the empty room. Outside, the city continued its endless movement, indifferent to the choices that would change everything, to the moment when duty and desire crashed into each other, to the impossible question of what happens when you fall in love with someone whose past you've been hired to investigate. The journal slipped from her hands onto the bed, still closed, secrets locked between its pages. And somewhere across the city, Jinwoo stood at his window, looking out at the same sky, feeling for the first time in years like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't drowning anymore. Neither of them knew yet what tomorrow would bring. Neither of them understood that the moment they'd stepped toward each other, they'd also stepped into the crossfire of a past that wasn't finished with either of them. But tonight, for this one perfect moment suspended between truth and consequences, they'd both chosen to be brave. And sometimes, that's all love is. The terrifying, beautiful choice to be brave with someone else, even when you don't know how the story ends. If this story left you on the edge of your seat wanting more, smash that like button and drop a comment telling me whether you think Maya should tell Jinwoo the truth right away or wait until she knows more about his past. And don't forget to subscribe because our next story is going to blow your mind. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss it. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.